Are you suffering from leftover feast fatigue? You know, are you eating the same food 3 days in a row? But you don't want to throw it out, so what can you do? Well, this video is for you. I'm going to share with you some tips and hacks how you can preserve that food or use it in some creative recipes. This way, you can enjoy every bite of that holiday feast. Before we can dive into the fun stuff, I have to say, always be mindful of the 2-hour rule. Now you might be asking, what is the 2-hour rule? Well, you might have families and friends. You're hosting an open house, right? So you have families and friends coming over at different times. You have all the food laid out on your counter, and everybody is having a great time. But the 2-hour rule will say, don't leave your food unrefrigerated or unheated for longer than 2 hours. Because at temps above 40 degrees, foodborne illness bacteria can multiply. And it's even worse if you have creamy sauces, egg-based dishes, or dishes made with dairy. A pro tip, set yourself a 2-hour timer to remind you when to put those deviled eggs back in your refrigerator. Now, just one more myth to kind of clear up for food safety. You're told that you should always put your hot food on your counter and let it get to room temperature before putting it in your refrigerator. You know what? That's not really true. You can put hot food in your refrigerator. So don't let that stop you. Okay, now, for all those leftovers, we basically have two, well, I guess 3 if you wanted to count throwing it away, but let's say 2 good options. We can preserve or freeze that food or use it in a creative recipe that will reimagine the taste of our leftovers. So first, let's discuss preserving. So freezing can be perfect if you've had your fill of holiday dishes and you don't want to throw away a single bite. Now, in this case, you do want to take things out of your refrigerator and cool them on your counter until they're room temperature before you freeze them. Because otherwise you can get droplets of water, condensation, and that can cause freezer burn on your finished product. Now, to freeze, you can use vacuum sealer like my beloved WeVac vacuum or a regular vacuum sealer. You can use resealable Ziploc bags, any airtight containers you have, or my go-to a lot, aluminum foil. So let's talk about some user-friendly hacks when we're freezing. Maybe you have leftover rolls or pieces of pie. What I do, for the pie, I cut it into individual pieces and I wrap it well in aluminum foil. And I do the same for my rolls. And then I just slip it into the freezer, after I label it, of course. Now, those rolls I can just heat up real quick in my air fryer, and they taste almost like when I took them out of the oven. So that's a great way to preserve your different desserts and any rolls or breads you had with a meal. One of the things I always do when I have a big feast is make extra mashed potatoes. You know, the kind from scratch, not like this, because then I freeze them and I can have them whenever I want. But my tip is I add a little more butter before I freeze the mashed potatoes. And that just keeps the texture just about perfect. And I just put the mashed potatoes in the refrigerator and let them thaw out overnight. Or if I want them quick, I can thaw in my microwave. And of course, we always, for our Thanksgiving dinner, have stuffing or dressing. Really, it's more like dressing for my family because we don't put a lot of it in the turkey itself. We put it around the turkey. But leftover dressing, I like to place flat in a bag on a cookie tray and let it freeze. and then take the air out and freeze it. Because that way it's easier to reheat because it's all one level rather than a big ball or lump. And one of the things I like to do too is flash freeze. And I might do that with my mashed potatoes or my turkey or whatever. I just lay some parchment paper on a cookie tray, put whatever I'm freezing there, maybe in individual portions, leave it in the freezer for 1 to 2 hours, and then I put it in my bags and I vacuum seal. And that way it isn't all stuck together and it stays separate. One thing too I read, and it sounded interesting, is if you have leftover, like Cool Whip or Ready Whip like this, you can actually spray it on parchment paper on a cookie sheet, in little dollops, and then freeze them and bag them. And then whenever you have hot cocoa, like when the grandkids come over, you just take those out and drop it in the hot cocoa. Very convenient. But I have to admit, in my family, this is what mainly you see. So good. So to be honest, a couple days after Thanksgiving, there isn't any whipped cream available. Now, I always make a 20-pound or larger turkey for our Thanksgiving feast. And I know I'm going to have plenty left over. I mean, some of it goes home with the kids' family, but I still have loads left over. And that's great because I also do that same with the dressing and the mashed potatoes. And you get it. I make up individual food packets, freeze them, and then I can easily, on a busy night, take out that food, put it in the microwave, and have a really good tasting homemade meal, as opposed to, well, this is a meatloaf one, but you've seen the turkey ones too, right? You could have this, or you could have this. Another safety tip, make sure you thaw the food you take out of your freezer correctly. Don't just leave it on your counter overnight. You can thaw it in the defrost setting in your microwave and let it thaw out in your refrigerator, or in some cases put it directly into your oven or your air fryer and cook it that way. But don't let it just sit on your kitchen counter. Another tip, make sure you label everything. You don't want to look in your freezer and have what we call mystery meal, do you? Take time, label what the food is and when you put it in the freezer. Oops, how rude. I forgot to introduce myself. I'm Mary Ellen, or better known as Prepper Potpourri, and I have been making videos on YouTube for over a decade on how to keep your family safe from natural disasters or tackling everyday challenges in the kitchen. And if you are enjoying this video, give it a thumbs up. It really helps others find this content. And while we're at it, comment down below on your favorite way to use holiday food leftovers. So we went over freezing, but the fun part is finding a different way to use what's left over and be creative. You never know, you might come up with the next favorite recipe for your family. And what about leftover turkey carcass? Don't throw it out. It makes a rich broth and a great soup. And to be honest, I like my turkey soup a lot more than I like my turkey. So what do you do with your leftover turkey? Well, you can make turkey salad, turkey a la king, pot pie, which would use the gravy and veggies also, or one of my favorites, turkey enchiladas. Or maybe you have leftover dressing or stuffing. Well, you can mix it with shredded turkey and cream of mushroom soup for a casserole. And my husband likes this one. Stuff the mushrooms with stuffing, top with cheese, and bake for a quick appetizer. Or, I've done this before and it makes a great meatball. Just pulverize the stuffing into crumbs and mix with ground pork and form into balls and bake, and you have great tasting meatballs. How about your leftover mashed potatoes? Well, you can make savory mashed potato pancakes by mixing with eggs and breadcrumbs and cheese and you fry them until golden brown. Or how about a loaded potato soup? Great and creamy, and you just mix the mashed potatoes with chicken broth or veggie broth, milk and cheese, and top it with bacon and green onions. And if you're one of those families that always have the green bean casserole, well, what do you do with that if it's left over? You can use it as a base for quiche. Just add eggs, milk, and cheese, and then bake in a pie crust for a great breakfast or brunch dish. Or what about leftover cranberry sauce? Now, my family's not real big on it, but my son-in-law loves it. But since the rest of us don't really eat it, we always have a lot left over. And there's really fun things you can do with it. You can make this fantastic grilled cheese and cranberry sandwich. Doesn't that look yummy? Or you can spread it into your yogurt or your oatmeal, or even cocktails. And you can make a great salad dressing too. Just whisk it with olive oil, vinegar, and honey, and you have a perfect dressing for your salad. Now, what about leftover rolls? You have to be careful because they can go hard overnight, right? And then, well, I might give them to my chickens, but they wouldn't be good for eating. But you can also make garlic croutons. Just dice rolls, toss with olive oil, garlic powder, and Parmesan, and then bake at 350 degrees until crispy. Or what about making some leftover biscuits, French toast? Just dip your roll slices in a mixture of eggs, milk, and cinnamon and fry in a skillet. Or you can make leftover rolls bread pudding. I love bread pudding, especially with a caramel or pecan sauce. It's so, so good. And maybe you're lucky enough to have leftover homemade pies. This is my family favorite, apple pie. You can layer the crumbled apple pie with yogurt or whipped cream and make some parfaits. And you can have a holiday smoothie. I mean, there's a lot of neat things you can do with leftover pie. So now it's your turn. What's the favorite thing you do with leftovers? Comment below, and if you like, leave a recipe too, because we all learn from each other. And I hope you are having marvelous holidays, enjoying the season, and being creative with your recipes. And now, check out this video.